Hi, dear friends. Welcome to the next event within the Ukraine Matters Initiative. Today, we are lucky to interview Mr. Eugene Czolij, the president of NGO Ukraine 2050, the Honorary Consul of Ukraine in Montreal, Canada, and the 10th president of the Ukrainian World Congress in the years of 2008 to 2018. Dear Mr. Czolij, thanks a lot for your consent to join us today. We are grateful for your finding time to bring us your precious vision of the terrible war we have in Ukraine. We highly appreciate your kind consideration and support.
Thank you, Mr. Volodymyr, for inviting me, and thank you for the very important work that you are doing in disseminating information about this genocidal war in the language of Shakespeare, which allows maximum exposure of the events for the international community to be fully aware of the events in Ukraine.
Thank you. Well, before we start, I would like to mention that we'll also consider the questions our participants have asked while getting registered for the event. There is still a possibility to submit some questions by pressing that question answer button. Well, okay. So, Mr. Czolij, it's obvious that what we have in Ukraine is nothing but a mere genocide of the Ukrainian people being committed by the cynical Kremlin with its imperial ambitions. Ukraine has unfortunately become a slaughterhouse in the very center of Europe. And that happened because Putin has sent slaves to liberate quote unquote free people. How would you comment on the Moscow policy constantly claiming that the Russian soldiers are peacekeepers helping their brotherly neighbor?
Well, I think that this is obviously contradicted by the international community in a very clear manner, with the international community coining the events in Ukraine today as a genocidal war. The President of the United States called that a genocide on April 12th, which was the first time that a US president has declared that the events in Ukraine can be considered as a genocide. The parliaments of Canada, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, the Czech Republic, Ireland have also declared the events in Ukraine as acts of genocide. The Prime Minister of the UK has said that when looking at the events in Bucha and elsewhere, that it's difficult not to call it a genocide. So clearly the narrative of the Russian Federation is clearly not believed by the international community. Thank you.
Well, the world's support is unprecedented, that's right. But what about the blind Russians who get their truth, I mean, from the state media and are living in an alternative reality? They do believe that their country is good and that it's the Ukrainian army committing atrocities and killing civilians on its territory. Why is the Kremlin's propaganda so powerful? What do you think?
Are you asking me why is it very powerful worldwide, or why is it powerful in Russia?
Worldwide and in Russia in particular, because we have more than 80% of Russians supporting Putin and war in Ukraine.
I'll tell you that I'm interested in issues dealing with disinformation, as I consider that Russia has launched in 2014 against Ukraine not only a military aggression, but a hybrid aggression, which includes massive disinformation. I've decided for that reason with the organization NGO Ukraine 2050 to create an international monitoring mission that has over 166 members from 56 countries that are doing monitoring since June 4, 2021 in 42 languages of the world. And we're picking up this type of massive disinformation. In order to give you just the parameters of this disinformation, I very often use a quote that was made by the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Benjamin Ziff, when he testified shortly after the initial invasion in 2014 before the U.S. Subcommittee on Europe and Regional Security Cooperation of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and more particularly on November 3, 2015. And Mr. Ziff has said that Kremlin sponsors these disinformation efforts and campaigns with a sophisticated 1.4 billion a year propaganda apparatus at home and abroad, which claims to reach 600 million people across 130 countries in 30 languages. So in 2015, according to the US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, Russia's disinformation machine costs over $1.4 billion a year. So it is a massive investment made by the Russian Federation to disinform the international community about various events, including obviously regarding Ukraine. In terms of the situation of Russians in Russia, there are various factors that are affecting their perception of the world, including obviously the fact that there is disinformation, and the fact that it is an authoritarian state does not tolerate any form of opposition, and that deals with any form of opposition in a very forceful and authoritarian manner. And obviously that there is obviously a certain number of that population that has an imperialist approach and worldview.
I see. Well, you know, the Western world is well aware now of what the Kremlin is, what in their majority Russians are, and we are sure that the international community strongly condemns the war waged by Russia in Ukraine and the Russia's crimes against humanity on our land. The world's support is again unprecedented, but the problem is that still we can hear some appeals to appease Putin, such as the former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger's calls for Ukraine to give up part of its territory to reach a peace deal with Russia. Well, can we treat such like cases as the elements of the Russian propaganda? What do you think?
Mr. Volodymyr, during one of the manifestations in Montreal, I've said that the statement of Mr. Kissinger, who at the time that he made it was during the Davos Economic Forum in Switzerland. At the time he was 98, and a few days after was 99. And I've said that that statement by Mr. Kissinger is certainly a senior's moment for Mr. Kissinger, and that a 99-year-old man can be forgiven for a senior moment. However, what is totally unacceptable from my perception is for others to be picking up that type of message and to be disseminating things like that Ukraine will have to give up some of its territory, that we must find some kind of a face saver for the Russian despot that is committing a genocide in Ukraine. That type of narrative, from my perspective, with everything that we know today, is totally unacceptable.
I see. Thank you. So the next question. We have a new umbrella term, Russianism, that is the Russian fascism, for all the crimes the Russians have committed in Ukraine. So we all know about the massacres in Irpin, Bucha, Gostomel, the destruction of the city of Mariupol, that is the Ukrainian Aleppo, for our Western colleagues to know. The Kremlin blames the Ukrainian army for committing all these atrocities and mentions them in its propaganda. So the question is, and this question is very tricky and simple at the same time, why do Russians continue lying, realizing that the whole Western world does know the truth?
I think that disinformation is subtle, and disinformation works in various forms. So disinformation can be, as you know, that there's a saying that you repeat a lie 10 times and you will convince some individuals.
That's right.
You have people that sometimes make decisions, and we're looking very often at the quickest material that one can get access on the internet in order to form quickly a decision that one needs to make. And some people's in political circles, some journalists even sometimes do not take the time to verify certain information and can be repeating or making decisions on the basis of disinformation. So disinformation is a powerful tool that works in a very subtle way in order to influence public opinion or to disinform people in order to influence them to make the wrong decision. I think that is the purpose of Russia's disinformation today.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, we all know well about the Russian marauders who consider every Ukrainian town to be a target for collective robbery. Putin's horde does not care about patriotism. The only incentive for them is to fight for profit. Still, propaganda does work. And again, for the Russian Federation citizens, their soldiers are heroes. So do you believe that they will somehow realize that they were wrong?
I think that there's people that have access to the right information are already coming to that conclusion, which does not necessarily mean that they will voice it for fear, if we're talking about Russians in Russia, for fear of reprisal. But I think that today we live in a world where we can see both on TV, on social networks, the events ongoing in Ukraine, the terrible bombardments, the destruction that one sees. And I think that only Putin apologists or useful idiots today can continue disinforming the world or repeating disinformation out of basic disinformation on their own end, or because they are, as I've said, useful idiots.
Okay, I see.
Or paid agents, or paid agents.
I see. Okay, but well, we see that propaganda does work. That's true, but it's not the case when we have the Iron Curtain, when the borders were closed and you had no chance to see how people lived abroad. I mean, I'm talking about the former Soviet Union. The ordinary Russians now, having a lot of friends and relatives in Ukraine and other countries as well, had a chance to compare the real and the propaganda-created world. Well, does it mean that more than 80% of the ordinary Russians supporting Putin and the war in Ukraine also have common imperial ambitions and an insatiable desire for the unpunished seizing of our territories and other territories of other states? So what do you think?
So I think that I already answered that question. I think there are three factors that are influencing their view of the situation in Ukraine. One is disinformation. The second factor is fear of reprisal. And third is an imperialist approach that they have regarding the world.
So, but what prevails,
including Ukraine?
What prevails among these three factors? What do you think? Do we have a chance to have the situation when Russians just realized and acknowledged that they were guilty at the moment when they invaded different countries? Well,
I haven't, Mr. Woodman, I haven't really analyzed what it will take for Russians to realize or not to realize. And
okay.
frankly, between you and me, I don't think that's the most important item on my agenda. I think that the most important is for the international community to provide Ukraine the necessary support for Ukraine to be able to win this genocidal war as quickly as possible in order to avoid further destruction and further human deaths, further injuries, and further suffering.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Thank you. Thank you. So the civilized world is sure to know that Russia is a true terrorist state, planning to invade not only Ukraine, but also other countries like Poland, Romania, the Baltic states, etc. So the Russian soldiers have proved to be very cruel, explaining their viciousness through the messages like, "Who let you live better than we do?" They do deserve punishment. Russia is to pay a very high price for the Kremlin's crimes in Ukraine and other countries. The war criminals must be punished. Then the question is, will the Russian society be condemned and isolated for centuries to realize the cynicism of their silent consent to Putin's desire to destroy Ukraine and other countries as well?
I think that with all the ongoing inquiries that are currently ongoing in Ukraine, the evidence will be gathered, properly sorted out, and eventually adjudicated before a competent court, and that justice will be rendered. At the end of the day, I am of the viewpoint that justice always prevails, and I think in this particular instance, justice will prevail, and the crimes will be punished.
Okay, thank you. So the next question refers to the specificity of your job, I mean, as a lawyer. So the whole civilized world should never have thought that Russia might become the globe's greatest liar and manipulator. Putin perfectly does what he has been trained for. He lies and manipulates. But this lie and manipulation have a threatening scale. Russia should never be trusted as a subject of international law. So the question is, why isn't it excluded from all the powerful international organizations yet? And will it be ever demilitarized and denuclearized in order not to threaten the world with its nuclear weapon?
Well, I think that the very simple response to your question is lack of political will on many of the aspects of your question, and I think that there is pressure for Russia to be removed from as many international bodies as possible. There are certain bodies that have a legal framework that makes that very difficult to achieve, but I think that there is more and more of a push to exclude Russia from international organizations in which they have clearly proven with the barbaric conduct that they have demonstrated since the beginning of this genocidal war, that they do not belong in those international organizations.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So after the numerous sanctions imposed, many citizens of the aggressor country started claiming their innocence and blaming the civilized world for Russophobia. So their argument is that Putin does not represent Russia as a whole. So why should everyone be punished for one man's insanity? That's their argument. They either don't understand or pretend not to understand that the attack on Ukraine is a manifestation of the ideology and policy they have supported and funded for decades. So what do you think? Who is responsible for the Russian Federation government's policy?
Russia and the Kremlin is responsible for its policies and for this genocidal war, and people that support it, which includes oligarchs and obviously the army that executes this genocidal war, the generals that give orders to commit acts of genocide that allow for indiscriminate bombardments of civil infrastructure, of residences, of shootings of the civil population, of the numerous disgusting stories of rape in Ukraine, of starvation. So I think that obviously the Kremlin and the people around the Kremlin, the generals, the oligarchs are responsible for this. Obviously, the president of the Russian Federation, Putin, is the ultimate culprit for this genocidal war.
Thank you. So it is obvious now that we are not going to surrender. I mean, Ukrainians. We'll never give the Russian invaders any piece of our land. We'll never let Putin reestablish the former Soviet Union and call it the Russian Federation in its borders he wants it to have. On the contrary, we are to restore our territorial integrity, and we'll become a prosperous European country again. So can you describe the new or revived democratic Ukraine we'll have quite soon? Tell us the vision of a new democratic Ukraine after this war, after this invasion.
Well, you've done a very good job, Mr. Volodymyr. I think that I share your viewpoint that Ukraine has demonstrated an incredible strength during this genocidal war. We're into the 110th day of a war that many have estimated would last only a couple of days. So the heroics that the Ukrainian army is demonstrating is incredible, and I share your viewpoint that Ukraine will win this genocidal war, and that the victory of this genocidal war will be the guarantee that Europe will once again experience peace, security, and stability, because only an independent and territorially integral Ukraine is going to ensure peace, security, and stability in Europe. So I think that is why it is in the best interest of the international community to ensure that Ukraine wins this genocidal war. And the challenge of the Ukrainian people, including Ukrainians living in the Ukrainian diaspora, is to ensure that that day comes as quickly as possible in order to avoid further destruction and human suffering. As for how the situation will evolve after Ukraine will win this genocidal war, I have seen images of Ukrainians returning to areas that are no longer being bombarded, and I look and am shocked when I see the destruction of towns, cities, and yet people are coming back and during interviews indicating to journalists that they will rebuild this country. So the same heroic approach of the soldiers, it can be seen with the Ukrainian population that has a phenomenal strength to be able to take that kind of an attitude. And I think that people with that type of an attitude will clearly reconstruct with the support of the international community a better, stronger Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do agree with you. I do believe that we are strong enough, and we have a lot of courage and a lot of strength to prove that we are on the same page with the Western world, and we'll do everything because our people are quite industrious and skillful, and we'll rebuild it very quickly, and everything will be okay. Hope for that, and we do hope and that the victory will come quite soon. Well, now let's consider some questions submitted by our attendees. So was there any chance to avoid this war? What do you think?
You know, that's a question that is difficult to answer with certainty. And I'll tell you why. Had somebody told me prior to February 2022 that any army or any country would be attacking a nuclear power station, I would say nobody is that crazy. Nobody would be firing missiles at a power station, a nuclear power station. Yet in March, the Russian army was attacking the largest nuclear power station in Zaporizhia, and that is clearly indicative that is very difficult to get into the brain of the leaders in the Kremlin and to understand their logic on many issues. That being said, I think that if the international community had reacted at the call of the Ukrainian authorities, including the president of Ukraine in December and in January, and imposed the sanctions that it ultimately did after the full-blown invasion in February, had they done that in December, in January, in other words, in December, had they given Russia an ultimatum to withdraw the army that was being mobilized at the border of Ukraine, that's surpassed eventually 100,000, that they have a certain number of days to remove that army, or Russia would be excluded from SWIFT, that the certification of Nord Stream 2 would be immediately stopped, that sanctions will be imposed in order to ensure that that de-escalation does occur and that Russia ultimately complies with its international obligations, including the Minsk agreements. Had the international community at that time provided in a very overt way the defensive lethal weapons that it ultimately provided to Ukraine in order to pass a very strong message that it will not tolerate a full-blown invasion, perhaps that type of message, that's a strong message, and we all know that Putin only understands the language of strength. Perhaps if that message had been delivered with concrete acts that would follow the message, Putin could have ultimately brought to the position that he would have had to rethink his strategy, and perhaps would have concluded and stated to the international community that it was just a military exercise and that there was no intent to invade another country. So I think that one will never know for sure, but clearly I regret very much that the international community did not take the geopolitical agenda in its hands and did not dictate the conditions, instead of taking the position of warning Russia that it will react, and ultimately only taking a passive approach, that is an approach that reacted to Putin's decisions and deeds. So that is why I'm saying that I regret that the international community was not more proactive in that situation.
I see. Thank you. So the next question is, why do many international businesses refuse to leave Russia, and who can make them stop supporting the Kremlin's war in Ukraine?
I think that that's an excellent question, and I think that probably the biggest motivating factor is profit. And unfortunately, there are, as individuals, also businesses that put more value on profits than on human lives and on principles, which justify for them something that is unjustifiable I certainly hope, in the vast majority of the international community.
Thank you. So the next question is very important for us. Will Putin be brought to the Hague Tribunal? Do you believe in that?
Well, I certainly think that there will be an effort to ensure that. One obviously knows that in order for anybody in his position to be brought before a tribunal in The Hague, be it that tribunal or a special tribunal, like for the one for the former Yugoslavia, one needs to have the state extradite its former or its current leader, and that will obviously mean a change in the regime in Russia in order for Putin to be extradited before International Criminal Court of Justice.
Okay, thank you.
And your guess, Mr. Waldemir, is as good as mine as to when that will happen, but I certainly think that will happen.
Sure, it will happen for sure. The last question is, will Ukraine get that money necessary for its restoration?
I think that it will. I think that clearly we're seeing the international community, as you have indicated, providing unprecedented support to Ukraine. I think that it will also depend to a great extent on the amount of pressure that is put on the international community, including to continue to demonstrate that Ukraine today is not only fighting in order to protect its territorial integrity or to gain it back for the already occupied territories by Russia, but that Ukraine, and it's not just a slogan by the president of Ukraine, that Ukraine in reality today is defending democracy, that Ukraine is defending the whole of Europe, and that Ukraine is essentially the difference between us living in the future in peace, security, and stability, or for us to experience, God forbid, the Third World War. And case in point, I think that we need to bring various examples to demonstrate, like I said, that this is not just a slogan. And I've indicated to you the shelling of the nuclear power station in Zaporizhia. Well, I very often in various appearances that I make, be it before any committee or in any forum, during interviews, during seminars, I do indicate that on that day that we all watched in horror on TV, and we saw a building next to the reactors burst into flames, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine sending an alarming message on Twitter to the international community saying that stop the shelling, because if this station explodes, it will have the consequences that are 10 times worse than the consequences of the Chernobyl explosion. So some pseudo experts are now debating whether it would have been 10 times or not because it was a more modern station. But I, for all of those, simply say the following. On that evening, when Ukrainian firemen and the staff at that nuclear power station, at the risk of their lives, were putting out the fire while the shelling was continuing. Clearly, they were not defending only Ukraine, they were defending the whole of Europe. Because had that explosion occurred and God saved the world from a tremendous potential catastrophe that evening, but had that occurred, we would not have been talking about 7 million refugees or internally displaced persons, about Ukraine. The whole of Europe would have been in a situation of having to face nuclear pollution. And as we all know, radiation does not need a Schengen visa to travel from one country to another in Europe. And we would have had, probably most of Europe would have turned into countries with refugees seeking a shelter in a non-polluted area. And it would not have taken the consequences 10 times worse to those of Chernobyl, 2 or 3 times. The consequences of Chernobyl could have brought that type of environmental catastrophe. So I think that Ukraine and Ukrainians in the diaspora need to be bringing such examples in order to demonstrate that it's not just a figure of speech when the president is appealing for support and says that Ukraine is defending democratic values, defending democracy, defending Europe, that Ukraine has already clearly demonstrated that in that and in other examples.
Yeah, I do agree with you. Thank you so much. Well, that's it. Dear Mr. Czolij, thank you so much for having you today, for this meaningful talk, for your meaningful answers, consistent answers to very difficult questions. We'll win for sure. The truth is on our side. Our Lord is on our side. Thanks you so much for everything you're doing for our land, for all those interviews, everything. You are just greatly supporting Ukraine. We wish you a lot of health and inspiration for future endeavors. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for everything you're doing in order to get the message out. And we do say in Ukrainian, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. And I assure you that the Ukrainian army, at least from our point of view, certainly deserves to be called heroes. And they are demonstrating incredible courage, incredible stamina, incredible heroism. And I think that with the support of the international community, Ukraine will certainly win this genocidal war. And as I've said previously, the real challenge today is to ensure that that victory comes as quickly as possible in order to minimize that incredible destruction and the incredible human suffering.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do agree with you, and I would like to add that our Ukrainian soldiers are heroes, and for us Ukrainians, those people, I mean Polish people, people from the Baltic states and other Western world countries are our heroes, inspiring us to fight because they support our country, they understand the threats the globe is facing at the moment, and they are our heroes as well, inspiring us to fight and making us feel that we are not alone. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, so much for supporting us, because we want to restore Ukraine and we want to have a prosperous democratic country in the very center of Europe. Thank you very much, dear friends. Thank you for your participation. Please visit our website, ukrainematters.org, and sign up to receive email updates on the upcoming events and more. We are wishing you all the best. Stay healthy. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.